Immortals of Aveum proves it's a grim time for single-player games. Immortals of Aveum developer Ascendant Studio, whose staff included veterans from studios like EA, Sledgehammer, and Telltale, made its debut with the magic-based single-player shooter last year. Shortly after, the team laid off around half its workforce due to poor sales. It sounds like the fallout has given the team a more dire outlook on the state of the AAA market. They revealed that the game's budget was around $125 million between development costs and publisher Electronic Arts' marketing and distribution expenses, but because the game undersold, it was impossible to recoup such high costs. The development cost was around $85 million, and I think EA kicked in $40 million for marketing and distribution. Sure, there was some serious talent on the development team, but trying to make a AAA single-player shooter in today's market was a truly awful idea, especially since it was a new IP that was also trying to leverage Unreal Engine 5. What ended up launching was a bloated, repetitive campaign that was far too long. I mean, from what I've heard, the campaign for Immortals of Aveum, it's not even that long to complete. If you were to do side activities along with pursuing the main story, it would take you like about 20 hours or so. Somewhere around there. Budgets are increasing for single-player games, but nothing else about the market has changed to compensate, outside of developers frequently bolting microtransactions onto the side of a project. But as budgets increase without feasible return, the entire business model is collapsing under the weight. Despite microtransactions and live service structures, dozens of games still die if they can't get a foothold in players' everyday lives. I'm going to provide a link to this article in the description so you guys can go and check it out for yourselves. Like, I don't know if Kotaku understands this, or maybe they do, it's just the way how they described it in their statement was kind of taken out of context. But single-player games are still thriving to this day. Like last year, we ended up getting a lot of good single-player games from the likes of Alan Wake 2, Marvel Spider-Man 2, Baldur's Gate 3. Hell, Baldur's Gate 3 is still doing so well. The player counts have risen tremendously since it launched last time I heard. It's still a thriving single-player game because of what it has to offer in each act. Baldur's Gate 3 did so well and was praised so tremendously by critics and fans alike that it won Game of the Year last year. And I do agree that the development of single-player games, the production, the budget as a whole, it's been going up tremendously with each generation that comes. I just think it's weird for Kotaku to point out that it's a grim time for single-player games when in reality they're still doing well and they're still in high demand from the fans to the dev studios that are currently working on their projects as we speak. And yes, I am aware that there ends up being this huge drop-off when people complete a single-player game. It's like that with a lot of other single-player experiences, but even then it's like the demand is still there. Like, people are still liking single-player games and still want to indulge in it to this day, provided they find some other ways to enhance their experience. Especially when you take into account that live service gaming is really taking a turn for the worse. Hell, I'll give you a recent example. Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. That is a game that for the most part you can play entirely by yourself, however it's tied down to being a live service when it doesn't need to be. And as a result, you end up getting a narrative, you end up getting a story where it isn't as cracked up as we would have liked it to be. The characters don't have much depth to them, and just the overall concept of what it is that you do in the open world of the live service game that you play, it's just not enough to keep people invested in the long term. If you ask me, I would take a single player game over a live service any day, because I know I'm about to get a more quality experience over a live service title. Yeah, you can make the case that single player games aren't doing as well as they should be, especially when you take into account that not a lot of people are really investing enough time into them now in comparison to when they first launched. But even then, it still doesn't change the fact that single player games are still thriving. A lot more people would prefer to play that over another generic live service that has little to no substance for people to want to be reeled in and be invested in as well. I also heard that PlayStation isn't planning on doing any major releases for their big game franchises until like March or April of next year. Like, for anybody that's expecting another Last of Us title, another Uncharted, another Spider-Man Spider-Man game, or hell, even a sequel to Ghost of Tsushima, if anybody is expecting that to release at any point throughout this year or early next year, unfortunately, that's just not the case. Now, that's not to say that PlayStation isn't planning on releasing any new game for the time being. Like, I'm sure that there are some games that are currently in development that are slated to release at some point throughout this year or into early next year. This more so correlates with their big major franchises that they back. The way I see it, I could sort of understand where the person that put together that article from Kotaku is coming from. I think he meant that because Immortals of Aveum didn't do so well, it shows that single player games are not doing as well as he thinks that they should, or not that many people are being invested in these titles as they were when they first launch. If so, I can understand that, because, you know, there's obviously going to be a big drop off for single player titles once people finish playing through them the first time. But that being said, there's still a lot of demand for single player experiences to captivate us in the market, especially when you take into account that live service gaming has really hurt the industry really badly over the last several years. I mentioned that Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, the more recent live service title, that game isn't doing too well either. Whereas a single player experience like Baldur's Gate 3, that game is still thriving to this day. That last I heard, the player counts were going up after the game's launch. I just find it hilarious how there's so many other single player titles that are doing so well, but the one title that isn't doing well, unfortunately things are not looking too well for these types of games. I don't know, man. I just thought it was interesting. I thought it was pretty hilarious. But I want to know from you guys, what did you make of the article that Kotaku had published in regards to Immortals of Aveum, but also just single player games as a whole? Do you think single player games are going to continue to thrive? And if so, how do you think the trajectory of them will go as the years go by? Let me know in the comments down below. I want to know what you guys have to say. I do want to apologize if my information was a bit all over the place and it didn't seem to make much sense. I just woke up not too long ago, so I'm still trying to refresh my memory in regards to this topic. So once again, I do apologize. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, you're more than welcome to drop a like on it. And if you enjoy this type of content, you are more than welcome to hit that subscribe button and that bell notification so you can be notified of when my newest video has gone live. But until then, thank you all so much for watching. It's been your boy Discreet, and I'll catch you in the next video.